It's September the 27th, 2022, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off right and introduce the players. Hey, I am Gerissar, a PvP Padawan.
Hey guys, I'm Bigmoran and I don't have a catchphrase yet.
Hey, I'm TreesapJake and I'm a Death Knight enthusiast.
What happened there? First you're a shaman, like now you're a Death Knight?
Well, we are talking about Wrath of the Lich King Classic, so I've got to be talking about, what I'm enjoying at the minute, which is Death Knight.
That's true. That's true. Okay, all right. Fair. But are you going to become such a multi-classer that you're going to be changing your class every time you do a key phrase, or?
No, it's this is a special edition. People are going to listen back and be like, "Oh, I remember when TreesapJake did that special intro." That's what I'm going for.
True enough. All right. Well, and that's true. We are here. Is Wrath Classic? Classic dropped effectively last night. Yesterday afternoon. Yesterday in the wee hours of the night, depending where you were in the world, because they did that global launch that they like to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
did you guys happen to see the leveling contests that were happening? I mean that now I never know how to pronounce that guy's name. Naue. Yeah, he won, but there's that other group of people. The guys in second place had the most insane leveling configuration I've ever seen. Did you guys happen to know what I'm talking about?
I
No,
know
not at all.
I know what you're talking about, but I wasn't paying attention to it. Like I know there was a bunch of leveling things going on.
Yeah, this guy had two groups of warlocks, okay, and was getting summoned to various parts of Northrend and killing groups of mobs as a warlock himself. And so he would clear a pack of mobs and then get invited to a different group, get summoned to a different area of Northrend, and just like rinse and repeat over and over. It was pretty intense. It was very organized. There was like 20 people orchestrating this whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. I mean, of course, now one doing a little grind in Ice Crown, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where he was. Yeah, so that was interesting. It's always neat to see what sort of ingenious ways people find to level in new expansions.
Indeed.
New expansions.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I gotta wonder how much they spent. Did they spend time on the Wrath Classic beta trying to figure out how they were going to do that, or do you think that they took information from private servers that were running before Classic was even around? Like, how do you think they came up with that especially that multiple warlock summoning group idea?
Well, I think the warlock summoning group, a lot of them are from that website Rested XP, which is I guess they make an add-on and they make leveling guides.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably some sort of promotional thing for them. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because there's a few different methods people are having. There is sort of the solo world grinders. People are just killing legions of mobs. There's people in dungeons, soloing dungeons, and then kind of everything in between. So I think there's a lot of competing theories as to what is fastest.
Yeah,
and I guess just now had the best theory, and so it worked out well.
Well, 9 hours best theory. That ouch. I couldn't sit for 9 hours and grind that if I wanted to. All right. So I'm playing Classic. I am. Jake, I know you are. Big. Are you?
100%.
Were you playing Classic too?
I logged in at the wee hours of the night last night just to start getting Rested XP. My queue popped like, I don't know, at 11 p.m. and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed. And so I'm currently in queue right now for the evening. You have to section out a portion of your day, right? To sit in queue. So that's where I'm at.
That's a great piece of for people who are sitting out there. If you're sitting in queue and you got nothing to do, hop over to the stream, listen to us yammer for a bit. Why not?
Exactly.
There you go.
Sounds like a great idea. Okay, Jake, you first. rather than the last 2 weeks, what have you done in the last 24 hours as far as Wrath?
What haven't I done in the last 24 hours? Honestly, I mean, in the pre-patch, I've done an incredible amount of battlegrounds. First of all, I did a absolute metric ton of Alterac Valley until they fixed the old, what's it called? Call to Arms bonus battleground sort of honor gains, which was insane. You were getting like 3K for a win at for the new day, so that was amazing. So you get like a load of like honor cap just so quickly. It was incredible. But I was literally doing that up until the point that Wrath dropped. I was in a BG when it dropped. I came out and I got a bar of XP. So wow. Yeah, that was insane. So that I got a nice little advantage from that one. So that was really fun. But to be honest with you, we went to Howling Fjord and I did group dungeon grinding in Utgard Keep. And I can tell you, it was awful. It was so mind-numbingly painful and gave very little XP. So wow. I think a lot of us are kind of decided that maybe there's a better path to go. So
yeah, you'll have to go watch what Noah did.
Yeah, I think I might have to. I don't know if I can do it as a DK, but I can. I'm sure I can figure that out.
Oh, I'm sure you could. And I remember, so I was actually watching you on stream.
Yes.
Tanking dungeons, which was weird, to be honest. Only because I was expected to see you on a shaman, and then I see you on Death Knight, and then I see you're only Death Knight in a dungeon, which meant I'm like, oh my goodness. But then
I'm tanking.
You were tanking, but then there was also like 2 world firsts for like I think it was a herbalist and a skinner that popped while you're on stream, or was that server first?
So that was server first.
Oh yeah,
that popped in. Yeah. So basically, I think it was like a bunch of people. Like it started off with a herbalism, for server first, and I mean these guys are mental. Like they just got 450 like really quickly. I'm sure they did the exact same thing that the Big was talking about, which was just guys portaling them all over the place. Everyone kind of making a concerted effort and getting all the way over there just to kind of I don't know, get the herbs or something. I'm not sure how they did it. It just seemed insane, really, to me. Just like the speed at which they're doing. I mean, I was doing dungeons where I was the only miner, and I was getting mining, and I definitely wasn't getting it that fast. So it was nuts.
Yeah, it sounds pretty crazy. And I guess Big. So since you only really sat in queue only to get your rested XP, what else did you do? Any prep before Wrath dropped, or were you doing the same thing as Jake?
Yeah, I was farming honor. I didn't get a full set of gear. I got like half. Like I'm half boosty gear and like half PvP gear, and then I got some of that Scourge Invasion gear too. Which obviously isn't the best, but whatever. And so yeah, I mean, I did kind of minimal prep work. My basic assumption was, okay, I don't really need to put in that much effort into pre-patch because I know that the gear is going to be replaced probably early on into questing anyway. And I think at least I was hoping to just quest anyway because the gold you get from questing is actually pretty decent. I think they intentionally kind of designed. I think there was kind of a change in philosophy between TBC and Wrath where I think they pumped a lot more gold into quests and the quest rewards. You can actually get a decent amount of gold. So I'm not too upset. I'm just planning on questing, obviously vendoring gear that I get from quests, and that way I can have a little bit of gold going into the start of the season. I don't have enough gold right now to buy the cold weather flying. So, I mean, I'm hoping that once I'm 77 and I can unlock it, then, hopefully I'll have enough gold. And I think, from my understanding, they do design the quests to get you that, 1K by the time that's available to you. So, see, I'm not uber tryhard with the prep. I did some prep. I did some battlegrounds. I had the most fun in Alterac Valley. Did not have fun in Warsong Gulch. I tweeted about this like, oh my gosh, people are so bad at Warsong Gulch. It's actually mind-numbingly like annoying. But Had fun in AV, defending towers.
Yep.
You know,
Being the sloth on the ore.
doing the dirty work. It's defending those towers. That's hard work, man. Like you only get to interact with one player every like 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
it's tedious, right? It's exhausting labor just sitting in those towers, but I endured.
That's funny. Yeah, I feel so far behind because I didn't do any of the honor grind prep work. Like I barely had a chance to play it up until like the day of launch. And then I made the mistake. So skill capped. I mean, we talk about them every once in a while, but you guys put out they put out the videos on all the classes. So I was like, oh, Warlock, I should probably read that up and see what I should be doing. So then I was like, oh, okay, so my talents are wrong. All right, you got to set that up. Oh, my professions are wrong. Shoot, I should probably fix that. And then I was like, oh, I have to like completely start learning mining and blacksmithing from scratch. So I spent I spent the day running around leveling my professions instead of actually leveling in Wrath.
Hey, that's not a bad idea. I mean, I think that's the most annoying part of the old expansions is like I mean, it's nice that the professions actually matter. They give you power, they make your character stronger. But oh my gosh, leveling those, oh, I do not miss the leveling part of the old professions. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, me neither. It and I guess the upside is so. I don't know if you guys know of this or not, but or even really the listeners. So, the community managers over at WoW, specifically Atlas, the former leader of Bonus Roll Productions, who got a job there now as influencer correspondent, if you will, or the guy that works with influencers. He got a whole bunch of epic bundles and heroic bundles. So he gave us some heroic bundles to give away here. But he also, he gave me an epic bundle, so I was able to boost a character, and then I got a mount with that and some gold and everything, which was absolutely amazing. So at least I went from having a level 20, which I think I talked about last time I was grinding out my human warlock, to suddenly having a level 70 with flying and all the other stuff. I was like, woohoo, this is awesome. And then, but then I didn't have a chance to play that. So at least I was able to, ride around on a mount and do all the mining and that. I miss flying in old world already. Like I can in retail. Like I miss that so bad. But I'll say being able to at least like ride around and just mine nodes and not worry. I don't have to worry about these low level mobs even really hurting me or anything. So whatever. I will say, right before Wrath launched, actually like the gates opened and all that. I was actually competing. There's a whole bunch of people running around, a bunch of other level 70s mining copper in Elwyn Forest and that. So I was like competing with all these other people, and then thankfully, like once the boats started moving, they all disappeared. So I had like free reign of all the nodes, which was awesome. But I think other than that, for Classic, that's what I've been up to, and then otherwise did all the normal stuff I do in retail, which is running dungeons and having fun there and interacting with people. There's some people that I actually got a couple nice notes in Discord or in Whispers saying hey and thanks for being awesome and all that other fun stuff. That was some nice warm fuzzies.
Love to see that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, sorry, I got corrected. The title is Influence Relations Manager. Yeah. That's Atlas's title. Yeah. He's the IRM.
Mr. Fancy Pants.
Yeah, Mr. Fancy Pants. Indeed. Well, while we're talking about Atlas's pants, why don't we talk about the need, greed, and pass and get into our segments as soon as I can find... Oh, there it is. Here we go.
This likely won't be a clean fight, so keep your distance, eh?
All right, need, greed, and pass. Was supposed to be mine. I totally failed. So, Jake, you are covering my butt. You're literally
My favorite place.
You're acting as my pants, if we will, to carry on the pants thing. So, what's the nitty gritty and pass you got for us today?
Well, seeing as this is a special episode and we're talking about Wrath Classic, I thought we should talk about, Classic in general. So obviously a big debate at the minute is, where do we go from here? Do we go on to Kata? Do we do some sort of like Wrath Plus? Do we go back again? There are so many options and so many things going on, but I thought, let's go to the darkest timeline that could ever exist. And you have three options. Blizzard, it's 2077. Blizzard are still going. World of Warcraft still exists. And now they have three options for you to choose. It's Shadowlands Classic, Battle for Azeroth Classic, and Warlords of Draenor Classic. Those are your three options. You have to need, greed, and pass one of them.
Wow.
All three of them.
I'm sorry. I'm just hung up on the fact that I'm not even sure if I'm going to be around in 2077.
Yeah, jeez.
I've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk 2077. That's why I instantly went to that. But that's like the dystopian future. That's what I think about 2077.
We're gonna take your brain, Gerissar. We're gonna upload it into a hard drive, and you'll be able to play Warlock until the year 3000. All right, don't worry about it.
Well, thankfully, I have a small brain, so that's only going to take maybe a quarter of a terabyte, and you're good. So.
God. We'll need a supercomputer for you, mate. It's fine.
Running on Windows 8, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Windows 8, yeah.
Sheesh. All right. Which one? Wrath Classic, BFA Classic, or WoD Classic?
Shadowlands Classic, Battle for Azeroth Classic, or Warlords Classic.
Oh, I can take a stab at this first, if that's fine.
Go for it. I gotta think about this.
I think for sure I'd need on Warlords of Draenor. Even though at the time I wasn't super stoked on the expansion, I think it had its own little structural problems, right? Like there was a sense that the game felt incomplete and felt rushed, and it felt like part of the game was missing, right? But I think the PvP at the time was pretty fun. It had my favorite spec of all time, which was WoD Combat Rogue. That is probably the most fun I've ever had in WoW, was playing that. And so I'd go back and just play Combat Rogue probably all day. Don't hate me. So definitely need on WoD. As far as greed, I'm actually gonna greed on Shadowlands Classic, and the reason why is because BFA I think had its small moments, but I think BFA was, of all the expansions we've had in recent years, was the expansion where the systems themselves felt the most bloated. Where, I think with Shadowlands and with Legion, the expansion that sandwich BFA, I think the systems are relatively streamlined. Like Legion, right? PvP gear wasn't really a thing. It was all item scaling, which is fairly interesting. Shadowlands PvP gear was a thing, and most of your gear came from PvP. And BFA was just kind of this weird sort of Frankenstein experiment, in my opinion, of just how far the game could be pushed in terms of systems design. And I just kind of got fatigued from it, and so I didn't really play it. So I don't think I would go back and experience it. So need on WoD, greed on Shadowlands, and pass on BFA.
Very interesting.
Huh.
Gerissar?
Yeah. This is hard. So I liked Warlords, the PvP. As a whole expansion, I found it really easy. If anything, it was the expansion that I probably had the most ults at max level, and that I was just able to do things. Even if half of it was all of them just sitting in their garrison doing stuff. So in respect to that, actually, I'm gonna actually pass on it on Warlords Classic, because out of everything that it was, I didn't really. I felt probably the most loneliest. There wasn't a lot of social interaction other than the times I was raiding with the guild at the time, and seeing how everybody I raided with is also the same age as me, they're probably all going to be dead by 2077. So again, I'd just be playing by myself on my Windows 8 hard drive machine brain. And so in that, I'm going to have to need on Shadowlands Classic. I feel that the out of this whole expansion, especially in PvP, the fact that so many classes were viable, so many classes had things that they could do. We were looking at probably some of the largest amount of class and spec interactions in PvP compared to previous years. That part really kept me excited. And then for BFA, I'm gonna have to greet it, and the reason why it won out really over top of Warlords of Draenor was because although the PvP was meh and the systems were bloated, I feel like the PvE side to it was actually really good, and I really enjoyed the PvE side of BFA. So yeah, that's why I'm going to go with that. How about you, Jake?
Well, you know what? It's incredibly interesting, and I actually am pretty. I pretty much like when I was thinking about this, I thought, you know what, this is exactly how I expected you kind of both to go, because, and the reason why I sort of wanted to choose those expansions is because I think for PvPers most of the time they would choose WoD as need, and that's what I would choose. I would choose WoD for as my need, because WoD, for all of its hate, and Ashran was not fun. I didn't enjoy it that much. It wasn't that great, but I loved the gearing, and I played Enhanced Shaman, and I did Rated Battlegrounds. It's the first time I got high in anything. Some of the guys that I met there are still my buddies to this day. I had a great time in there. I also love the graphics update for all the characters. I like that. I like the changes. I know a lot of people don't, but I like the changes. I like the HD look of things. It was a good expansion. I enjoyed the storyline. I liked going back there. I just liked WoD in general, and I had a lot of fun. I would then, and as we're talking about PvE, Shadowlands and BFA are very good for PvE. I think as expansions for PvE, they are fantastic. They've done such a very good job at sort of making. I mean, look at Mythic Plus; it's in such a good state, and I think going into Dragonflight, it's going to get even better. So I think PvE is going to be. It's just very good in those games. However, I would greed BFA over Shadowlands. Yeah, I would. I would greed BFA over Shadowlands. And the reason why is because from a Shaman point of view, I felt as if Shaman was in a... I liked the fact that even though I had to PvE, if I PvE'd, I could get all the same gear as absolutely everyone else before I set foot into the arena. And then when I set foot into the arena, everyone was on a level playing field. And that allowed me to improve my skill rather than feel like I had to get a certain place before I could then be at a level playing field. And that was my big problem with Shadowlands, is that despite the fact that we've got PvP gear, I felt as if the jump in eye level between the rating brackets meant that you spent ages getting out of a very terrible sort of like 1500 to 1800 bracket, and then either got hard stuck 2k or went up to 2-1, and then finally felt like an absolute god and you could continue. But by that point, you're so used to sort of like having to play in a certain play style to avoid just basically getting totally crushed by people. I don't know. I think as time has gone on, I've enjoyed Shadowlands less and less. Whereas with BFA, it was okay to start with, and then it got better. Even with all the sort of corruptions and the systems that they were doing, I understood where I sat in there and was able to kind of just focus on gameplay and my play style. Like, you know what, I could Q2s into an Asa rogue who had full gushing wounds, and I knew exactly what I had to do, and I was never worried like there's a gear difference. I just knew I had to play out my mind in order to win, and that was kind of what I focused on. Same with DH and etc. Everything like that. Like I could plan that. Whereas sometimes with Shadowlands, I feel like things are so random and things are so crazy. Anyway, I'm going on a bit too much, but I would pass Shadowlands. So need WoD for the PvP, greed BFA for because of its PvE aspect, but also because of its I preferred sort of the gearing and pass on Shadowlands.
I love it. I was realizing as you were talking, I assumed that these were going to be classic no changes versions.
Yes, yeah. Classic no
But
changes, yeah.
But that's the thing, though, is that they're not no changing. Like they're making changes. Like, and we're going to talk about that in class. What we're going to see in Wrath Classic and that. So, if that was the case, what changes would you see? If they were going to make, let's say, Shadowlands Classic or BFA Classic or Warlord Classic, what changes would you like them to add in or make? Jake?
So to be honest with you, with Warlords, it's so far back, I couldn't possibly tell you what things I can remember, but I remember the last patch. I think that was 6.3. I think was a lot of fun, and as we've seen from Wrath Classic, going on to the final patch tends to be kind of the fairest for most expansions. Like, it's when the balancing kind of gets done the best. And I think, if we did that on BFA, I think we'd be in a good place. I think if they implemented the stuff earlier in a lot of the expansions, like sort of, for example, just having access to gear easier, not having to do PvE to get PvP gear, like a vendor where you could just buy stuff, but it's all the same eye level, kind of like WOD gearing. That would be sick. And I think corruptions, for example, being on the vendor, if people wanted to do that again, like we are talking about sort of best case scenario for the worst case.
Yeah.
And I guess in Shadowlands it would be, for me, would be I would play it and I'd probably enjoy it if there was a homogenized sort of WOD gearing system in that way, like everyone kind of got that same item level, or it could be less than PV or not, but that for me would actually make Shadowlands really like good for me, I think.
Yeah. I think the same. Big, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I think the unlimited conquest cap was an experiment, but in my opinion, proved to be an experiment not worth repeating, or at least repeating again in a much scaled down version. I think kind of my story with Shadowlands Season 4, and I don't remember if we talked about this last time, is I did not queue that week where the conquest cap was lifted. And so what do you know? Like, people try really, really hard, and suddenly my character is infinitely further behind everyone else. And I think that kind of sucks. But at the same time, there's always that difficulty of maintaining alts in the modern expansions and catching up alts, and I think that's where the unlimited conquest cap tends to help. So I think some sort of middle ground system in between, a cap of 800 per week versus an unlimited cap. I think something in there needs to change. I think what should have been done for the unlimited conquest cap is increase conquest gains by a significant margin. That way, like, say right now, right now, if Bigmoran wanted to start PvPing again in Shadowlands, it would suck, right? Because I primarily do 2v2, and that's a bracket I enjoy playing.
Yeah.
And if I want to get full gear in 2v2, oh my god, that's gonna take me so many hours worth of queuing, and I'm gonna be losing because I'm gonna be under geared, and that's gonna suck. So if the conquest gains themselves were significantly buffed, rather than the conquest cap simply just being removed, I know I would be much more confident in my prospective future of the game. So that's kind of one thing I think we should take away from Shadowland, the end patch of Shadowlands, is that sure, an uncapped conquest system works great if you have the time and energy to queue, really hard the moment the season or the moment that system is released. But if you don't, coming back to that is kind of going to feel a bit jarring.
Yeah. I think those are both very valid things. I think the complete lifting of conquest cap was a interesting experiment for a final experimental season, but I really hope they don't bring it or do that again.
Yes, I think some sort of there needs to be some middle ground. They overshot it, I think, right?
Well, let's be honest. They're responding to community because the community saw what the PvEers were getting, which was an unlimited Valor, and they could just chain run mythics and get a whole bunch of Valor gear and do all that, and that looked really awesome. And then in the meantime, the PvEers were like, "Hey, what about us?" Or the PvPers were like, "What about us?" And so the devs was like, "Okay, you think you do, but you don't. Here you go."
Yeah, I just think there's a clear. I don't think that it's apples to oranges in this case, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a clear case of apples to oranges, where in
Yep.
PvP the experience of gearing is a bit different since you're playing against actual human beings, and you have that sort of the anxieties that come along with that. So yeah, I think this should be a learning lesson for the devs looking forward, and it definitely can be improved upon. But I think it was a step in the right direction, but kind of a step to in the wrong direction at the same time, right?
I would say this is a lesson for both sides. This was a lesson for the devs, but it was more a lesson to the players. That
what? I might actually caveat this and say the unlimited conquest was totally fine if all the gear was homogenized. Because the point being that the reason why it was so ridiculous is because, as Big pointed out, and this is the exact same thing that happened to me. If you're busy on that day that that made the full conquest cap, and you had the last time you played there was a cap, right?
Yeah.
And you haven't got the day off, like exactly what happened to me. Everyone was doing RBGs that entire day and were fully geared and had their rating and everything like that all sorted. You come back and you have nothing. You do any arena to try and get gear, do any RBGs to get gear, and you're just queuing into guys who've got full geared and then got their rating. And the gap between you is so incredible that it doesn't matter how you outplay, you're just struggling.
Yeah.
Versus certain level of people. And I think actually it would be totally fine. There would be very few issues if they just made it. If you could just get the same gear again, like it wouldn't be too much of an issue. There wouldn't be too much of an eye level difference between last season's gear versus this season's gear, and that's I think maybe something they can take from Wrath, something they can take from like the earlier classic stuff, where the differences between gears from each season isn't massive. It isn't so like terrifying that you could be in last season's gear and like be totally stomped. You might put up a fight, but
I'm glad you brought that up because I have some data to demonstrate that.
Have I shot myself in the foot?
Later, no. You're absolutely correct.
Oh, good.
Okay. And so,
thank God.
I'm rubbing my hands together. I can't wait to get into this.
Okay. Well, let's hit the PvP events quickly, and then we'll get into the subject analysis and actually start talking about WoW Classic instead of all the other classics that may or may not happen.
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
All right. So, upcoming events that we know of. There's the Dalaran Gaming. He's always doing his 5v5 1v1s. Although he's been playing a lot of Wrath, so I don't know how much he's going to be doing for the next little bit. Flark. So I said he was on pause last time. And then the guy they figured out the new software, the website updated. And so he actually ran a tournament last weekend. So these are back on, but I don't know when the next one's going to be. So again, you have to go over to his Discord and keep an eye out for that, as I will as well. There is the Armed Forces Dungeon Clash from the 14th to the 16th of October. It's going to be just retail, mythic plus speed running, key pushes and whatnot. If you guys are interested, the Oasis community, they're hosting a charity event. It's a spooky walk on the 30th of October. So if you want more info, go over to their Discord. I'm assuming it's going to be probably like, dress up in your most spookiest transmog and go for a walk and try to live. We'll see. And then Blizzard official events, we don't know any yet. So last podcast, we talked with Adrian. He had hinted that there will be some stuff coming up with Wrath Classic before the end of the year, but being just launching, they're probably holding off on the announcement of that for at least a few more weeks. We'll see. That's about it. Do you guys? Have you guys heard of any other events that I've missed out on? Yeah.
Not that I can think of.
Pardon me.
Not that I can think of.
All right. I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Throw it to the listeners though. If you guys have heard something, let us know, please. We like to shout people out. Sorry, Big. I think I talked over you. Did you have any?
I was gonna say no. I was gonna say I haven't heard of anything either. So nothing from me.
Well, alrighty. Well, in that case, let's get into Wrath. Here we go.
I'm gonna light you up, sweet cheeks.
And probably the fastest subject there, the fastest events we've ever gone through. All right, subject analysis: Wrath of the Lich King Classic. So as we alluded to, there was changes. They did make slight tweaks to the game from the last time it launched. A bunch of new information that has come out. So let's talk. Let's I guess gear. We were talking about that last when we were talking about the other classics. So let's start there. So as far as I understand, there's going to be three sets. There's going to be your blue set, which is just honor, but I think you can also buy it with tokens. There's going to be your initial conquest set, which conquest, and I think you can get with tokens as well. And then there's the last one, which is the actual gladiator set, and that's the one where you actually need to have pretty good rating, and a butt ton of conquest points in order to buy. I got that right?
I don't remember how right you have this. There's definitely honor pieces, which I believe are Savage.
Yes.
Gladiator's gear. That has no rating requirement whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
There is the highest tier of gear, which is Hateful, which has rating requirements on each of the main pieces, and I think maybe some of the off pieces, but I don't remember if the off pieces have no rating requirements. But I believe there's a tier in between that is epic as well. So I'm sorry, Savage is blue quality gear.
Mm-hmm.
Hateful is epic quality. Then Deadly is the highest quality gear.
Yeah,
okay,
that's
Hateful.
Yeah.
And then there's Hateful in between. So it goes Savage, Hateful, Deadly. Hateful is epic, but I think it has lower rating requirements on it, and it's lower item level. I don't remember exactly how it all works.
Okay.
something
like that. It's kind of confusing.
It's interesting because from people that I've spoken to, they've often said, like, go for like some of the hateful off pieces. Going for the hateful off pieces is kind of like worthwhile. But apparently it's just not worth over Deadly. Like, apparently, like, some people I've heard have said that basically it's kind of like, that it was sort of like a kind of mistake set that was put in, because I think it's the only one where there's kind of like a few options in the season 4 gear. Like, I think Hateful and Deadly both existing is the only time in Wrath. I'm fairly sure, I might be wrong, but it's kind of like, it's sort of like it was almost there sort of, as a kind of like a leftover, in the kind of same way that Karazhan was kind of left over from Classic. Like, that was originally going to be the kind of end raid of Classic, but kind of went into TBC as a 10-man. So that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity cost with the difference between Hateful and Deadly gear, as far as honor pieces are concerned, because I believe the Hateful off pieces, which again are lower item level, are significantly cheaper than the Deadly off pieces. So I think, you could potentially buy 2 Hateful pieces for the same cost as 1 Deadly off piece. And, that will at least carry you over momentarily. I mean, the TLDR, I guess, for anyone listening, is that the system, in a way, kind of mirrors what you're probably already used to, where there is this introductory set of gear that you can get from basically farming battlegrounds, which is Savage gear. But at the same time, you can get some pieces from Honor that, for the most part, will be relevant even with a full set of epic gear.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of one of the main distinctions between the older expansions and the Shadowlands is even those honor pieces do kind of stay with you, even as the rest of your gear kind of goes past them. And then of course, right, there's PvE gear, which we haven't really touched on yet, and that's kind of its own little animal. But I think from what I've seen from pre-BIS lists is and even best in slot lists is most people kind of have a mix of PvE and PvP gear if they want to be, quote unquote best in slot.
So I have to point out, and I've highlighted this from chat. They have the answer. So yeah. So the blue tier is the tier set is blue and savage, but it's only head, shoulders, chest, gloves, and legs. Middle set is epic. That's the hateful. And again, set pieces. You have the set, which is your head, shoulders, chest, gloves, legs, and those have a rating requirement. Deadly, everything, all the pieces have a rating required. You can only get the weapons from the deadly, and that's 1940 or higher rating. And off pieces for hateful are honor. They're not conquest. So it's, I guess the tier pieces on the hateful is conquest, but the off pieces are honor. So yeah. So thank you, chat.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, chat. And
I think that's pretty much what you're saying, anyways.
Yeah, and one thing I texted you guys before the show started about, almost 2 hours ago, saying I wanted to talk about base stats and base damage because I think that is entirely relevant to the discussion about gear. One of the things that I think is so jarring from more modern expansions that is completely different from Wrath is in Shadowlands, right? If you have a gear disadvantage, you're basically tickling everyone that you're attacking in full gear. Say you play rogue, right? Sub rogue, or say you play the most broken thing in the game. I don't know what that is currently in Shadowlands. Outlaw rogue. Sure. Say you play outlaw rogue, okay, and you just hit level 60, and you have full honor gear, and you enter arena, and you're going to be playing against someone who has full, conquest gear, upgraded. You're not going to be hurting them whatsoever. Like, good luck forcing a cooldown from someone when you're undergeared in Shadowlands, right? But in Wrath, the base damage on spells is relatively high, meaning even if you don't have that much gear, you can still hurt someone. And I in the show notes, if you want to review those later, I provided an example of, what full gear looks like in Wrath Season 5 compared to Wrath Season 8, and what that also looked like in Shadowlands Season 1 compared to Shadowlands Season 4. So the biggest, most obvious difference is that between Shadowlands Season 1 and Shadowlands Season 4, health pool values over doubled. So for druids, for instance, in Shadowlands Season 1, your health pool was roughly 42k with fully upgraded conquest gear. In Shadowlands Season 4, it's almost 100k. So more than double. In Wrath Season 5, your base health as a mage is around 18k, and in Season 8, it's 26k. So less than double. So even if you have less gear than someone, and even if you have outdated gear in later seasons, the damage you're able to do proportionate to how many stats you have is much higher than it is in Shadowlands, because just the base damage of spells is higher, which makes any sort of gearing discrepancy less impactful than in Shadowlands, for instance. So that's I think that's one thing that people tend to overlook, is that in Wrath, your spells hit pretty hard even if you're in crappy gear. That doesn't, of course, you're going to be worse, but you're not at such a disadvantage compared to Shadowlands.
Well, I'm just glad you said that because I was so worried earlier when I was like, "Oh no, I've messed up." But it's good to know. I kind of prefer that.
I do like it. I think that's really important. Is that in this video game, everything's really relative. Like it is, if your spells aren't doing a lot of damage, by number wise, but the health pools are low, then that's okay, right? Because it's all relative, right? It's percentages. So if your spell is taking away 1% of your enemy's health versus 5% of your enemy's health without cooldowns, then that I think that's an important distinction, and I think that's definitely the part where we're at with Shadowlands, where you're even when you're fully geared out, like your basic spells are really just some basic tickles until you're able to pop a cooldown and you have some buffs that pop, and ta-da! Now you're all of a sudden able to do a bunch of damage. Versus
and
Wrath doesn't really have that, as far as I remember. Like there's that you have the spikes, right? You definitely have to have your CDs, you have your defensives, you have your CCs and that, but the baseline damage is much greater than what we're feeling in Shadowlands, I'd say.
Yeah, and like something like elemental shamans. Elemental shamans are going to be good pretty much throughout Wrath's entirety.
Mm-hmm.
And but the thing is, lava burst damage doesn't change too much between season 5 and season 8. Of course it does get higher, but it doesn't get like exponentially higher. So you lava burst someone in season 5 gear, even with full savage gear, I mean you're taking away like at least like a third, like a quarter to a third of their HP.
Mm-hmm.
In later seasons, it might be a fourth to a fifth of their HP, but it's still really impactful. So it's like every spell you have in your toolkit, if it hits someone, it's gonna hurt them quite a bit,
Yeah.
even without much gear. And some spells just kind of scale better than others. I know off the top of my head from my understanding, corruption. You'll love this, Gerissar. Corruption, for warlocks,
Yep.
is a spell that scales really well with gear. I can't give you the exact reason why. Yeah, but Affliction Warlocks while they might not be the strongest in season 5, they'll definitely later on the expansion just get exponentially better.
Yes, they do.
Arms Warriors are another case with armor penetration, which their damage is still good in season 5, but it will become way better in later seasons where more armor pen gear is available, which is it's kind of interesting. So it's what's interesting is we're playing on one patch, but it's going to be different every season because gearing will kind of change the strength of every single spec a little bit, which is kind of cool, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think it's sick.
I think it's awesome. And just on the gear thing, I know it was mentioned in our Discord channel that the whole concerns about what they're doing, because the PvE gear is changing too. Like before, we went from season tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 as we moved through the patches of Wrath, and as you finished a tier and went on to the next one, that previous tier became obsolete, right? Your gear just the next tier gear was just that much better. But this time around, and I mentioned this, there was an interview on the Method stream right before they started their Wrath race to 90 or race to 80. Sorry. Brian Birmingham was on there and he was talking about this. So what they're actually going to do is they're going to leapfrog the gear a little bit. So when Naxxramas is over and they move onto the next tier, Naxxramas 10 will actually start dropping Naxxramas 25 gear. So you can still do that. And then they're going to start leapfrogging the gear, and then they're also going to interweave in heroic dungeon stuff, or some heroic stuff as well. So it's going to maintain the relevance of the raids and the gear, depending on what your playstyle is, and what your guild can actually put together. Because some guilds won't have enough people to do a 25-person raid, right? So it allows then that the raid can still go back and do some old gear and do stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always really partial to 10-man raids. I infinitely prefer that format over 25 or what is it, 20-man raids now? I don't know what people do these days.
So
I think it's
Mythic is the 20, and then normal and heroic have that scalability, if I remember correctly. So you can do 10 to 25. It doesn't have doesn't have to have 25, but some of the scaling gets kind of funky if you don't have the right numbers, depending on number of healers you need versus number of DPS and that stuff. So
yeah, right. In any case, though, like the 10-man content in Wrath, from memory, was always really fun. I always felt like having a 10-man group of people always felt a bit more more manageable, I guess, and more sociable than a 25-man group. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, I guess while we're on the topic of raiding, I know that's kind of a big point of contention for a lot of people when it comes to Wrath gearing. Is the question is, will I need to do PvE? And I think the answer to that question is, you're right. It depends, right? I mean, if you want to be uber best in slot, sure, yeah, go. You'll need to PvE. And I don't think I've seen a single best in slot list that hasn't included PvE items. But based on what I was describing earlier, since base damage is so high, you'll still be competitive without that PvE gear. At least for the earlier stages of the expansion for season 5, I think for sure there'll be players who are getting rank 1 or whatever with full PvP gear who have very minimal, if no PvE gear at all. So I wouldn't be too concerned, and plus the content is so like chill and easy at the beginning of the expansion. So it shouldn't take up that much time. The bosses aren't that intense, and you can usually you can clear Nax right within 4 hours or something, probably even less.
If you do all the wings all in one run, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny you say that, because I remember running Wrath back in the day, and maybe I'm just that bad of a player, but those dungeons were hard. Like I remember running normal and heroic mode, like Utgar Keep, and what was it? The gauntlet there, where you have to run the line, and then there's the strafing dragon. Yeah, that did me in. I don't know how many times.
Yeah, but I'm referring more to the raids themselves. Like I think Nax 25 is clearable it was clearable with the pug back in 2008.
Yeah.
So surely it's clearable with the pug now.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I ever back in the day I never killed Malagos with a pug, or at least maybe I did a few times. I think Malagos was kind of the more difficult one, but I don't think it should be an issue in 2022 when people, are super optimized, right? I think the problem with Malagos back in the day is it required you to learn the dragon riding mechanics, and no one knew what the hell they're doing. Now I'm sure there's going to be some sort of weak aura distributing roles to people, telling them exactly where to go and what to do. So I don't think it should be an issue whatsoever. Yeah, I think Nax 25 will easily be clearable every week with a pug, like within a few hours. It'll be a breeze. I'm anticipating. The one thing that kind of I think will be a souring experience for a lot of players is, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize how prevalent GDKP runs are these days. Like, so many items on hard reserve, soft reserve, all that sort of nonsense, that political nonsense that people get into with gearing these days. That's the unfortunate part that I think really sucks. which isn't necessarily. What's that?
I think they killed the GDKP stuff. I can't remember why. I've been saying this for a while. It has sort of ended. I think they were addressing this, and I can't remember what exactly it was that kind of made it that the case. And I think it's the fact that they made all these changes. Like you can get 20, because the big thing with GDKP was the fact that people would be coming to the game and people would want to catch up and get gear, right? So a big part of it was that they'd do like, Grill, Magtheridon, obviously in TBC, they'd do SSC and all that sort of stuff to get the gear so they could do progress current content like BT or whatever, and then eventually sort of somewhere plateau. And they were big because they obviously people had a ton of gold and they were they kept on getting more and more gold. Now with the changes that Brian talked about with being able to get 25 man in 10 man or getting 10 man in heroics, it means that people can just go ahead and do their own stuff and get the best quality gear without having to go and buy it, basically. And I think there's some other things that are kind of killing it, and I can't remember exactly why. I can't remember if there's something, but there was something along those lines where I think that might get weaker. But I just think there's going to be less and less people trying to get that because the opportunities will be better for them to get it. I can't remember the reason why though. I'll have to do that. I'll have to figure that out and then get back to you another time.
Yeah, I think in any case, I mean the main takeaway is like sure there are those like high ticket items like those super desirable items like Betrayer of Humanity for melee DPS, which I think will inevitably be kind of difficult to get, right? That's going to be like items like that. Everyone's going to want them. They're going to be best in slot. It's going to suck when you lose the roll on them, whatever. But I think you'll still be able to compete without Betrayer of Humanity for the majority of cases, as long as the rest of your gear is okay. So yeah, I think PvE gear is definitely on a case by case basis, and I think again with high ticket items, it's going to matter a lot. But for random, braces, for instance, like who cares if you have like PvE braces or PvP braces? It's not gonna make or break your experience.
No. Well, I think that's important because there's still the resilience, right? So PvE gear doesn't have the resilience, so you still need to get enough resilience that you at least have some survivability. You could run into like a random BG in PvE gear and probably do really well, but I don't, and maybe some lower, like the lower level or lower CR arena stuff. But I think once you start getting mid range and start running into people where they have a bunch of resilience where and you don't have enough spell pen, then you're probably going to be realizing the importance of the PvP gear though, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think yeah, again I think it's definitely a case by case basis. Like some classes like Warlock, for instance, from my understanding, you typically for PvP, you want to be itemizing PvP gear because you're a bit squishier, and of course, getting haste is always good, but you don't necessarily need that haste right as a Dutch or Warlock as long as you're hitting those Chaos Bolts. So, and like a Warrior, for instance, Warriors typically want full resilience, and Armor Pen's not going to become a thing until later on the expansion. So some classes can just get away with itemizing one way, and again being totally fine. And yeah, I think going from full PvE gear to full into if you're trying to just wear straight up PvE gear in PvP, I think you're going to probably have a bad time. But on the reverse side of things, I think wearing full PvP gear in a dungeon or raid isn't going to necessarily be an issue nearly as much. So yeah, I think PvP gear seems to win the battle overall, if you ask me.
No bias.
I think you're right. I think so as long as you're not trying to be the 1%, right, and do like the cutting edge rating where like you're trying to be the best numbers on the DPS meters, PvP gear will work just fine in dungeons as it does in PvP. But yeah, I think PvE gear becomes limited in PvP, especially when you're talking about raiding stuff. All right. Big, I know you're always about the tier list. I don't know what it is with you about making lists, but you love to make these lists and say what's the best of anything. So you put this in here, flavor of the month spec. Oh, what's the FODM for the first season? Are you going to tell us, or is this going to be we have to go watch the video?
I think there's some safe picks for what is going to be really good for each role.
Yeah.
Specifically during season 5, it's for melee. It's probably going to be Arms Warrior, Sub Rogue, and Unholy DK. Sub Rogue will arguably be at its best in season 5, simply because damage scaling. So season 5 damage is going to be proportionately higher. Shadow Dance is absolutely busted in season 5. I don't know if you guys got a chance to play the beta at all, but Sub Rogue damage is really disgusting during Shadow Dance in season 5. They'll probably taper off a little bit. There are some wild cards on the melee side of things, like Feral Druids, for instance. Feral does a ton of damage, but is really squishy. So, there's definitely other melee that are going to be good as well, like Ret Enhancement Shaman. Then some melee that are going to be okay, like Frost DK and Asa Rogue. And then some melee that you probably shouldn't play, such as Combat Rogue and Fury Warrior. I mean, you certainly can play those things. It's just kind of a bit awkward. Definitely not as strong as they are on retail. But I think Warrior is the clear winner of the expansion. If we had to pick one melee DPS that's going to just be good throughout the entire expansion, it seems.
Yeah, 100%. They as we talked about, they scale super hard. They're strong in general. They're super tanky. I know that Fury in PvE is incredibly good, and obviously Arms in PvP just gets insane. Obviously, those Shadowmourne wielding monstrosities will be present at some point, and that's going to be incredibly scary. And as we talked about, the armor pen, just the amount of shred is going to be insane. So they definitely win. They're just good in all aspects, really. By the end of it, I think most people that have a warrior will probably enjoy themselves. I think for a lot of the expansion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were saying that Unholy DK, there's this perception that and DK is going to be broken. And a lot of that came from, original season 5 Death Knights, which were broken.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny if you go back and you look at the patch notes for the early seasons of Wrath, it is just literally walls of text of Death Knight nerfs. It is insane.
Yep.
Literally every ability, like the first major content patch of Wrath, every ability for DK pretty much got nerfed.
Yep.
So, the game version we're playing on, which is 3.3.5, which has been rebranded as 3.4. This 3.4 version of Unholy DK is still really good, but it's not nearly as strong as it was in original Wrath Lich King.
Yeah.
The big thing that DKs offer is Summon Gargoyle, which it hits really, really, really hard. It can be CC'd by paladins and priests with Turn Evil and Shackle Undead. And it's definitely one of those abilities you have to respect. And of course, one unique part about Wrath is silence effects and disarm effects cannot be trinketed. So DKs have Strangulate, which catches a lot of... It definitely caught me off guard a lot of times on the beta, just trying to trinket Strangulate and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's just a habit. And so I think, they have kind of two unique mechanics in season 5, but I think for the most part, DKs are I hate to say it, but like a very honest melee class in Wrath. They're a bit, they're a bit zugzuggy. They want to end the game fast, but they're relatively balanced, all things considered. They're strong but not too strong, and have a bit of a skill cap, and so I think that's really cool. Yeah, and I don't know, Jake, you said you're gonna play a Death Knight. I'm
Mhm.
assuming you'd want to play Unholy for PvP, or are you gonna try Frost?
No, I'm definitely sticking with Unholy, and there is a reason why. Because the most amount of fun that I've had, uh, in probably in a pre-patch PvP season ever, really, has been playing Corpse Explosion, as
Oh
Unholy.
yeah.
And it's honestly the best thing in the world. Like, you'd be queuing up with the boys, and then they see you get onto a target. You kind of like you're getting your dots up, your scourge striking, your blood striking, and then you've got the gargoyle out. The gargoyle starts doing some damage, and then suddenly out of nowhere you're getting a 4K crit from Corpse Explosion that absolutely totally rinses them, and it's the funniest thing. It's so good. So I'm really enjoying that playstyle and the burst combination that Unholy has. Also, as a GM of a guild, on Fire More Alliance, if anyone is interested in joining, I
Self plug.
have of course, the reason why I've done it is because I I have hard reserved Shadowmourne for myself. Screw the warriors. I'm gonna get Shadowmourne for that. So and obviously it's hard to do, Frost DK with Shadowmourne, and that's my aim. So I want to get good at Unholy and hopefully and just enjoy the expansion. I think it's such a fun spec. So I'm happy to play it. And I'm also loving Blood, by the way. If you haven't played Blood DK,
Uh,
it's super fun. Just
yeah.
so
Yeah, I forgot about Blood DKs are one of those things where you hope, like, if you played a melee DPS, for instance, you're like, oh my, I hope I don't like queue a 2v2 into a Blood DK. It's always like
yeah,
felt unwin. I know they're really good in duels into melee
yeah.
as well.
Yep.
I mean, the one unique thing about DKs, and we'll mention them later, and Holy Paladins is they're kind of the two classes, two classes with actual defensive cooldowns. Like that's the thing, and we'll kind of discuss this in a bit. Is Wrath Lich King isn't as cooldown based as Shadowlands,
Mm-hmm.
but DKs and Holy Paladins they still have a lot of cooldowns, and so they're kind of unique in that way. Um, yeah, so that's a bit interesting. Gerissar, I'm assuming you're not going to be playing any melee, or were you planning on playing melee in Wrath at all?
So it depends on my time. Definitely doing the warlock. Yeah, you gotta scratch that. Take off the rose-colored glasses and scratch that itch, if you will. Um, I'm really tempted. I'm, I had a friend who had a DK. Me and him used to run a twos all the time just for fun. So I kind of want to do that, but I'm really tempted to pick up Ret Paladin.
Uh,
I'm really tempted with that
that's
because
that's
that's fun.
that that's a good pick. And
I
did you
know.
did you hear anything about the one-handed Red Paladin spec at all? Any?
So I saw a video on YouTube, but I didn't get a chance to watch it yet.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah,
I heard something about some about Ret Paladins with a shield, and that seems
yeah,
really weird.
it's kind of cool. So there's this spec you can play with Ret Paladin where you basically give up Divine Storm. So you don't have your big damage ability, but
Mm-hmm.
you do pick up Reckoning in the prot tree, and you use that in order to generate more Art of War procs. So Art of
Okay.
War gives you instant cast flash heals, or flash of lights, or exorcisms on melee critical hits. So if you're wearing a one-hander with Reckoning, you're gonna get a lot more melee critical hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're double hitting in some cases. So there's a
Yeah.
spec you can play that is technically still a ret spec, but sacrifices a little bit of damage in
Mm-hmm.
order to gain more off healing,
Yep.
and it works surprisingly well. It's had a lot of success over the years on different servers, and I think it'll
Pardon me.
kind of catch a lot of people off guard in season 5. They'll be like, "Is this a red paladin or prop paladin? I'm not sure." And then it's going to be a one-handed red paladin who's still able to do a lot of damage, but is way more tanky because they can just spam heal essentially. So that's kind of cool.
And that sounds great for 2s. Is that for 3s as well?
Yeah, so it can work in 3s. I think the main comp that red paladins are going to be looking to run in 3v3 is with a marksmanship hunter and a disc priest, and that comp works best with a two-hander, but it can also work with a one-handed red perfectly fine, from what I've understood.
I like a good Cupid cleave. That's
Cupid cleave, yes.
I know you don't like the fancy names.
I love the fancy names.
Fancy names are fun.
I was legit talking to my friend the other day regarding fancy names. That in WoD, before I think it had a name, I used to play Windwalker Fire Mage, which obviously became to a lot of prevalence in BFA and in early Shadowlands, and we used to call it Spicy Noodle Cleave, which I thought was hilarious. But that was just something we decided to go, and I love those names because I just thought, it's just so silly. This like they kind of as a community effort, people did it in the same way that Vanguards is, DK Ret Paladin, and it's named after Vanguards himself. Yeah. Which I think is great. I love that sort of thing. But it's at the end of the day, it's an extra stupid word. I mean, when you're starting to queue up African turtle cleave, nobody knows what you're talking about. Why would you bother?
What about was earthworm whatever and Ebola cleave and
Mongolian earthworm cleave?
The Mongolian earthworm, yeah. Some of those get a little funny.
Yeah, I don't even remember what that is anymore.
Yeah, but I don't know either. I love the fact that TSG cleave, the TSG is based after the team that came up with that took it to BlizzCon. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that stood the test of time, right? I mean,
still call it the same today.
I think that was one of the first comps that ever got the name that wasn't what it was, right? People never called RMP anything else other than RMP. Or I think it's PMR. People called it PMR for a while.
Yeah, that was weird.
Weird times.
I think a lot of the private server guys on like in the TBC era would call it like rogue priest. They call it PR, and it always used to throw me because I'd be like, well, who's getting the PR? Like, what's going on here? Is this some sort of marketing scheme or what's going on? No, it's just a twos comp that said really weirdly, because I think that's what people used to call it back in TBC, and obviously these guys, or a lot of them, maybe didn't move on really past Wrath or past certain sort of expansions and wanted to continue to do it, and therefore I don't know, just stuck with it. It's just really confusing. But I'd like to add that most of them, as far as I can see, now call it like rogue priest or rogue mage.
So. I have to plug Choice. If you ever want, there's a wonderful video he does on naming of comps and talks all about this and some of the iterations where twos were added on and all this stuff. It's really good. Go if nobody has ever, anybody listening doesn't know what I'm talking about, go look up Choice_AU on YouTube and look up his comp name video. You'll enjoy it. It's he starts off with the chalkboard or whatever, the whiteboard with, and he's pinning things up on it with the recipe cards or whatever, piece of paper. And by the time he's done, it's an absolute mess. It's awesome. All right. So we talked about melee. We talked about we didn't really talk about range though, did we? I mentioned that I was going to do Warlock, and I know that's going to be good just because I'm going to be playing it, so therefore it's going to be awesome. You mentioned Ellie Shaman being amazing as well, right up until Jake starts playing it, and then they'll probably nerf it.
Classic,
right?
Yeah.
But what else are we? What should we be looking for ranged and really for healing? Because if I remember when I remember playing Classic or Wrath back in the day, there was a bunch of classes that were quite viable. There was a bunch of different specs that you could play and do really well. Are we seeing the same thing?
Yeah,
Jake?
I mean, yeah. I think the expansion is typically skewed towards melee. But definitely there's a showcase of a bunch of really good spell cleaves that are, very iconic from Wrath. You already mentioned Ellie Shamans, and I think what makes Ellie Shamans absolutely insane is they have Earthbind Totem Root on, I believe, a 15-second cooldown. So they have an AoE root on a 15-second cooldown. Just really great damage. They don't really do the best sustained damage, but their burst is really really good. Very disruptive. Basically everything you want in a caster. Very tanky. Desha Warlock's also really good because, again, kind of similar reasons. Do a lot of damage. Pretty disruptive. Kind of annoying. And yeah, so it makes sense that Desha Warlocks and Ellie Shamans typically play together because they have really great zoning tools against other enemy melee. And from what I understand, Lock Shaman in 3v3 does surprisingly well into melee cleaves because they just basically, one person gets attacked, the other person just blasts damage. The big wild card, I think, for season 5 is BM Hunter, since, again, damage will be at its highest in season 5, resilience will be at its lowest. BM Hunters do a lot of damage during Beastal Wrath, and they cannot be CC'd. Well, they can be disarmed, but cannot be stunned, right? So they're going to be doing a lot of damage during season 5. They're going to be really explosive. Then you kind of have a lot of the other high tier casters like Shadow Priests, Frost Mages, Marks and Survival Hunters, Affliction Warlocks, which are all really really good. Maybe not the best, but still really competitive. Then some things that are kind of good, which include Arcane Mages, Fire Mages, Balance Druids, bit more gimmicky, but still have a place. And then a big iffy spot for Demo Warlocks, who are probably one of the most rare specs you'll probably encounter in Wrath for PvP, if you'll ever encounter them at all.
I wonder if League
They're
is going
kind
to
of
play
like,
Demo. Huh.
yeah, from my understanding, they're kind of like a BM Hunter. They have meta. They have one cooldown. They pop Metamorphosis, and if they win the game during meta, then okay, cool. If they don't win the game during meta, then they just lose. So it's
that sounds
it's
about
a
right.
very one trick spec for sure.
I think one of the best things about Elemental going into Wrath is just the way that the your abilities hit. In the modern retail game, Lightning Bolt doesn't hit hard unless you're using Stormkeeper, which has modifiers, and that's why it does hit hard. Your Lava Burst hits hard, but not quite nearly in the same way that it does in Wrath. And even then, it's sort of the main thing is kind of the echo, the random Earth Shock, crits like that. That sort of doesn't happen. Everything is kind of sort of almost homogenized in the way that your talents and your sort of like crit, hits super hard. It's like kind of like you're just quite destructive. Sort of like your consistent damage actually feels pretty good, at least in like BGs. If you're free casting, the damage you're putting out is kind of nuts. And then obviously we're talking about the big burst, the sort of like lava burst, chain lightning, the NS chain lightning, that sort of thing, into sort of like frost shock or earth shock, and you've kind of got this massive barrage of damage in a few globals, which makes them so devastatingly strong. And as we talked about, their tankiness as well. There's just so much that kind of works really well. Like the big one, and I think one of the main disadvantages of Ellie in retail is the fact that you can't wall in stuns, but you have a talent in Wrath which allows you to basically have a wall whilst you are stunned and feared, I believe, as well. So pretty much most of the big major CC that you kind of face, ones that you kind of really hard for you to break out of, you actually take less damage.
And it's passive too, yeah. It auto procs on stuns,
exactly,
fears, and I believe silences.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think range are interesting because I think we've kind of lost over the past few expansions like this idea of spell cleave. Of course, like we got some hints of it during Shadowlands when Mage Lock kind of had a resurgence, or like the end of BFA, right, where Cloud9 Mage Lock was like winning tournaments over and over. But we haven't really truly had a meta where spell cleaves are highly abundant in a while. But that's the thing with Wrath is spell cleaves are everywhere. There's like a million different variants of different sort of spell cleaves, all really popular. And a big part of that is shamans, right? Bloodlust is huge for casters. So even if you're not playing an Ellie shaman, you can typically play with a Resto shaman as a spell cleave and do perfectly well. Just because having that 30% haste or however, whatever it is, I don't know if it's considered haste. In any case, having the increased spellcasting times is absolutely insane as a caster. And yeah, I think there's definitely a place for the meta in Wrath for any caster DPS, specifically in spell cleaves. Pretty much put any two casters together, it's going to be okay, at the very least. So I think that's kind of exciting, and it's something we really haven't seen in a while. Like I think most people would argue that Shadowlands was definitely melee centric. I don't know if there'd be really any dispute to that. Right, a lot of just look at the representation, right? It seems to be loaded with Fury Warriors, Red Paladins, whatever. But it's kind of interesting to go back to an era where caster cleaves were really popular, and it's it's kind of exciting.
I think that's a big part of that is just the viability of things. It's like, as we were saying, Shadowlands has that melee focus, especially with the, so the rise of Ret Warrior, sort of stuff like jungle, outlaws prevalence, that sort of thing. And also the kind of armor nerf that kept happening, kind of aiding that. And that was kind of that was a really big thing. But obviously going into Wrath, you have a lot of things that are viable. Like, for example, I was chatting with a bunch of DK content creators that I know, and a lot of the suggestions from some of them were like, what's really good in season 5, or stuff like maybe Shadow Priest, DK Elemental Shaman, I think DK and a few other classes that you just be kind of like, what, really? Are you sure? That doesn't seem right to me. But it's just the fact that actually, to be honest with you, they're all viable. You're able to kind of push to a high rating Gladiator Plus with these comps because they actually do work together. Unlike when you go in and play retail and you've got a buddy that plays, I don't know, like Feral Druid, and you're like an Elemental Shaman and you're trying to play Ellie Feral Druid, and it's kind of like, well, actually, you know what? I can't actually play this comp because it just doesn't work. Whereas Wrath, it all works. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because there's a little bit of different abilities. The way things work in Arena right now, or in Wrath, are going to be slightly different than Modern. I wonder. So it's funny because we're talking specifically right now. You're mentioning right now about the melee stuff, but let's be honest. There were some very strong spell cleaves in the earlier seasons of Shadowlands as well. So I think that is worth pointing out. And since we're just into the early season of Wrath, I think we'll definitely see, as Big was mentioning in his research, like we're going to see a lot of spell cleaves plus melee cleaves that are valuable as we push into the later seasons, and as tier sets start to come in and some of those stats start pushing higher. We'll probably see. Well, not probably. We're going to see that change for sure. I don't disagree with that. I think the one other important part though is healers, where in Shadowlands there's always like some very specific healers that only worked with specific comps. Some didn't really work well at all, and were hard counter comped or whatever. But I think in Wrath, there's still some comps that rely on specific specs, but I always felt like that there was more flexibility in the healer you were playing with too, right? Like I don't think you always have to play well, I guess Holy Priest is the only one you wouldn't play because they don't have the Chastise stun and all the gimmicks that they have in Shadowlands. But I think you could play with pretty much any healer, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that only paladins and priests have magic dispels, so there are kind of limitations on that side of things. But like paladins kind of seem to be the healer that tend to work best into melee. They're obviously really tanky themselves just because they wear plate. Armor actually matters, right? And Wrath, the having plate is a big deal compared to having cloth. And that's kind of something that's been a bit lost over time. Not completely lost, but it's a bit lost over time. So paladins are typically considered to be like really good into melee. Disc priest considered to be quite good into casters. They're just kind of efficient that way. And then something like a Resto Druid is somewhere in between, kind of just a general purpose healer. Resto Shamans seem to be within this is kind of a departure from Shadowlands. So in Shadowlands, Resto Shamans typically played like melee cleaves, right? You want to play like an aggressive, in your face comp. It's good to have a Resto Shaman with your team. But in Wrath, it's again they seem to be kind of skewed more towards casters, simply because of Bloodlust. But I think like the biggest limitation is like healer dispels being kind of limited. Not every healer has a magic dispel. So, for instance, a warrior might want to play kind of exclusively with a holy paladin because a warrior sitting CC, sitting at Frost Nova is big deal. But I mean, there's definitely cases in between where certainly a Resto Druid could play with a warrior. It's just gonna probably be worse than a Holy Paladin version. But yeah, it seems like healer balance is actually quite good in Wrath, and honestly, it's quite good in Shadowlands. But the thing with Shadowlands is like people typically gravitate towards the sort of jack of all trades healer, whereas in Wrath, there really isn't a jack of all trades healer. I mean, Holy Paladin is kind of that, but at the same time, not really. So I think that's kind of the neat part about Wrath class design on the healer end.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Big. I never asked you. What are you maining and what are you gonna alt?
Right now, actually, I only have a level 70 frost mage. So I'm actually planning on playing mage. Was debating playing druid. Yeah, if I alt something, it would probably be Resto Druid.
Okay.
Or Disc Priest. Leaning more towards druid. Again, not having a magic dispel kind of feels not fun in many ways, but it's kind of hard to explain. It's like a healer thing. Like not having a magic dispel as a healer makes you feel really bad. It's like, oh man, but I'm sorry. I can't do anything about that. I wish I could.
Should be small globals for Cyclone though, surely.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like that's the thing, because I recognize that cyclones are fun and better kind of in Wrath, but man, I want to play with a rogue. I always like playing with rogues and can't really do that as a Resto Druid and Wrath and 2v2 at least. No.
Yeah. I don't know though. There's something about watching, trying to pull that Botar move where you do like the classic run in and cyclone somebody as they're super low so their healer can't do anything, and then CC the healer when the CD's reset.
See, that's a part of Druid I love. That's like that's a good part about playing Druid, but man, so every aggressive. Other moment where you're watching your partner sit CC, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, man. Like I wish I could help.
Yeah. I tell you what, nothing more boring than the Resto Druid Arms Warrior 2v2 mirror in TBC. That was just basically two people being rooted all the time.
Oh my lord. Yeah. I don't know how people could stomach that. I definitely watched a lot of those streams. I was like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible.
Yeah, exactly. You know what, actually, on a sort of like, obviously this is totally related to the fact that Classic, but I'm actually really pumped for fives.
Oh yeah.
Such a weird thing to say, but like we don't actually have that. And obviously in TBC, it's a bit, there's a few cookie cutter things, but with the added, being a Death Knight, like I when I try and think of my time playing the game originally, I just sat there going like, I actually have no idea what we play in fives. Like obviously, fives eventually goes away, I think, in MOP at some point, and I can't remember when exactly in MOP it went away. I think before the expansion even finished. or maybe it was the pre-patch to WOD.
WOD was MOP was the last of 5v5. After season 15, there was no more 5v5.
Because that's the crazy thing, like, you know, like having monks in a 5v5, like Mistweaver monk or even just regular Windwalker, like that's crazy. And I can't even think of that because I never played fives back in the day. So I'm actually kind of pumped for that and kind of figuring out what comps I can play on the DK and what will work. And obviously playing that on my Ellie Shaman too. It's going to be just a lot of fun, just kind of just figuring stuff out and just having a bit of fun, really.
Yeah, 5v5 is quite interesting. It's so different.
It is so different.
Yeah.
It's fun though, you know. It's you know, it feels kind of like an RPG in a small little way, right? Like there's this bigger team element that I think is missing from 3v3 sometimes, or you know, it's not as amplified in 3v3. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to fives. I mean, I've always been partial to that bracket. I always thought it was really fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely. And I think, by the way, I think they're keeping titles in 2v2. I'm pretty sure.
Yep. And you get glad mount.
Yeah, so that's cool. So
it's
I
amazing,
think there's. Yeah, and oh my gosh, I mean, I hope this isn't too contentious, but I really wish they would allow at least glad mounts from 2v2 in retail. I don't know why they don't. It's that's maybe a subject for a different conversation, but that's always kind of been a sore spot for me in recent expansion.
I think what you do is you have to ask all the DKs that played the original season 5 and ask them why, because I think that is exactly the reason why you can't get it in twos anymore, and has always been the case because of all those DKs they got.
Well, it was interesting if you read the forum post where they said that they're going to be introducing titles again in 2v2. They specifically mentioned, like, in the past, like, class differences were kind of amplified because people are less experienced, but in today's modern game, that's not as big of a deal, which is really it. I mean, I encourage everyone to go back and read the forum post where they said they're introducing titles from twos again, because it seemed like they kind of realize that the game, maybe the game hasn't changed itself, but the player base has changed in a way where imbalances aren't as amplified as they used to be. Right, like, if you played something broken back in the day, like, you were just basically a god of the arena, because players are on average worse. But these days, and Blizzard acknowledges this in their post, like, players have like a higher baseline skill level than they did 12 years ago. So why not, reflect that with reward systems? So I thought that was very interesting. Like, the language they used was very insightful. So definitely go back and read that post, because I think I mean, I definitely agree with it.
I don't disagree. It gives me hope that they might return back to bringing some titles back to retail twos and Dragonflight too.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah,
I don't know why they haven't. It doesn't make any sense to me. Of course, people will say twos. Yeah, this is a bit of a tangent. People say twos are imbalanced, but I mean, they've kind of always been imbalanced a little bit. And then.
I mean, technically, World PvP is unbalanced, and they're adding stuff for that. So, meh.
Very true. I think the thing to think about is that the game is balanced for a certain aspect, and I think that most of the time it is balanced, at least in modern day, on 3v3. So obviously there are going to be certain aspects of that make certain classes really OP in twos. But you know what? We're going to be playing Wrath of the Lich King twos, and I'm fairly sure a lot more things are viable in twos. So it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of see that. And you know what? I'm excited for the devs to see how people react to twos in Wrath of the Lich King. I don't think it'll be quite nearly the same feeling that people got from TBC, where it was just like, okay, well, warriors and rogues are a little bit OP. But you know what? It hasn't stopped other people. I mean, I think there's a gladiator Moonkin from TBC as well, who played. I can't remember if it was in threes or twos, but that is a spec that definitely shouldn't work, but was made to work. So I don't think. Yeah, I'd be interested to see an expansion where everything is meant to work, and then everyone just play everything and just see what we get, and it'll be fun.
So just because we're kind of getting a little late into the night here, um, are there any other parts about Wrath Classic that you think would be really important for our listeners to know about?
That's a good one.
Jake first.
I'm trying to think. I think a thing to think about is your guild and your time. So I'm gonna take a bit of an adult approach to this. Not only just to obviously plug my own guild, but also just the kind of like the mentality that I think will help you out. Obviously, everyone wants to play Dragonflight, and a lot of people will want to play it. And you'll be like, oh, well, I don't have enough time to grind this on Wrath. I'll do this on Wrath. Just go into this expansion, this new slash old expansion, and just have fun. Find a group of mates and go to their server. Hang out with them. Hang out with those guys. And just enjoy yourself and enjoy the experience. Take it slow with leveling. Don't go too crazy. Don't feel like you need to rush or catch up or anything like that, because the content is going to be there, and they've made it much easier for you to catch up if you do decide you want to go and then come back. So that's the thing I'd say. Don't burn yourself out on WoW. Don't kind of like go and be too crazy. Just enjoy the journey, because that's the biggest thing with Classic in my mind. And just have a bit of fun, because Dragonflight is going to come and you're going to want to play it. More than likely, most people will. So I just think don't try and like go too far. That'd be my piece of advice, really.
I love it. How about you, Big?
Yeah, I think the main thing to understand about Wrath PvP is, Shadowlands, and I think more modern expansions, the PvP is very structured. It happens in snapshots, right? Like every 30 seconds, there's this 5-second window where the PvP happens. The interaction happens, right? The cooldown trade. Every 30 seconds you get these windows, or every minute, every 2 minutes, right? It happens kind of in these predictable waves.
Mm-hmm.
That is typically not the case in Wrath Lich King, right? In Wrath, the game is kind of engaging from start to finish, and I think what sets a lot of players apart are the micro interactions. It's less about making proper cooldown trades. I mean, cooldown trades definitely exist in Wrath. It's just there's far and few between, and it's more about sort of the micromanaging of your character, which seems to matter. So, for instance, landing interrupts or faking interrupts or positioning, and all these little small things about PvP, which I think have way more value. Um, and so, if you haven't experienced that form of PvP, I think it's really fun. If you're a type of player who gets really excited landing an interrupt or faking an interrupt, I mean, Wrath is full of those sorts of interactions and those sorts of feelings, and so I think that's a really important part.
I think both of you guys are really. I don't have much else to add. I think
Don't play Warlock. I'm kidding.
yeah. If you see a Warlock named Gerissar, wave at him. Benediction, by the way. I think the one I'll say is this I saw on the 5 PvP changes that they put on the World of Warcraft YouTube channel, but this was kind of like a very subtle note. But the heartbeat resist was removed, so it doesn't exist in retail. It existed well through Wrath, but they decided to not have it in Wrath Classic. So what that is they had a regular basically a repeated saving throw check to see if the character would resist the CC, and so not just like at the cast, but also repeated as the CC continued. And so they've actually removed that. So now obviously damage can still break CC, but just randomly otherwise a character won't break CC just for no unapparent reason. So that's, I think, a very important thing to know, which is awesome. Great for me as a warlock, because that means that my fears just won't randomly break for no reason, unless somebody attacks and does damage into it, like my dots tick or something. What?
I was just gonna say, I know a lot of people will be happy about that, because you could see a lot of streamers cry about heartbeat. So
yeah,
understandably so.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. You go check out. I'll have a link for that in the show notes. But it's a great video. If you just go over to the World of Warcraft YouTube channel, you can watch it. It's I think it's a very important thing. Okay. Quick. I'm gonna skip the one thing we changed because I think we kind of already we've done enough talking about that. Let's roll into the news. And while I do this bumper, I'm going to see if Nix is still, or moderator Nix has been moderating the channel and doing a great job in the background. And they are going to start the draw roll while we do the news segment for the Heroic Wrath of the Lich King Classic bundle, which is going to give, we got this from the community management team. We're giving one away live here. The other one's going to be still on the Twitter forum or the Twitter post. I think Jake, you were doing one as well.
Yeah,
I believe Big, you were doing one as well through your guys' socials and stuff. But this one we're going to do here live, and then like I said, the other one's going to be on Twitter. So pay attention to Twitch chat. Make sure that you have the volume up and you hear all the instructions or read the instructions there. And while we do the news, we'll be able to announce who won that nice little bundle. And let's get into the news.
All right. Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
All right, Millhouse is done. Let's see who opened up an extra large can of whoop ass. All right, I think first and foremost, I want to congratulate Bayara, Takes, and Machiavelli for winning Flark's tournament. There's 3v3 solo queue. So this, I remember we mentioned at the beginning, what a way to come back. He had a $1,200 community funded tournament. Can you imagine? So yeah, so he gave those three players, absolute blast. If you guys, if you haven't joined in on his tournaments, highly recommend. You just join up. He'll make a. I think he's doing under RBGs now because of the cross faction, and so you can get 40 people all together, and then he just pulls people's rating and makes teams randomly. So if you're 1,500, you'll probably get synced up with a like a gladiator, and if you're a 2,000 level player, you'll probably be synced up with another 2K player or maybe an 1,800 player. So anyway, really good time. Link there to the challenge, which has the bracket in it. I think that's pretty awesome. Big, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, so there was a low-level PvP tournament hosted by Bread and Circus, and I'm sorry, by the Trial Exploit community. It was called Bread and Circus's Arena Tournament. Team Cat Jam won that. I watched a little bit of it. I think it was a level 20 free-to-play tournament.
Yeah.
Very interesting. It's kind of in my neck of the woods, but man, it's been a long time since I've encountered low-level PvP. I didn't realize how many cooldowns they had. Like, there was warlocks with unending resolve and yada yada yada. It was like, wow, I could, and people had transmog. If you had no idea, you thought you'd be watching like a high max level PvP tournament. So that was kind of interesting to see. And so congratulations to Team Cat Jam for winning that.
Indeed. And I think it was really good. I didn't understand a single thing that was being said because it was all in Russian, but it was still a really awesome showing. I don't know. Jake, did you watch the solo shuffle tournament?
I watched a bit of it. I did watch a little bit of it. So obviously that solo shuffle finished on Sunday, and so big congrats to Brunity and Glidey for winning the DPS and healer for EU, and then KZ Fox and Flay for winning the DPS healer for NA. I think honestly this format was really good. I enjoyed it. I think my feelings on Shadowlands and my desire to get my head space away from that meant that I didn't watch a lot of it because I was getting serious amounts of PTSD from playing the arena. But like it was definitely interesting, and I'm really happy to see that come back for Dragonflight, I think it'll be really, really interesting. A really interesting way of doing it. And I also think just allowing, and this is the thing that I feel strongest about it, is that it will allow new players, new names to kind of come up and kind of make their sort of stand in the WoW competitive scene. And I think that was the kind of thing for me, because I'd never sort of seen Casey Fox before. I don't think I'd really seen Flay unless I'm just completely and totally just off my rocker. And I've, they may be big guys and big streamers, but they kind of came up and won it, versus BlizzCon champions. So it's very interesting to see that, and I think that's what I'm kind of really looking forward to, and I think it's such an awesome concept.
Indeed, I have to agree. I try to keep cognizant of everybody that is streaming and high level content and that. And I've never heard of KZ Fox and Flay, so Big, I know you're more in the trenches than I am. Have you followed these people before, or do they stream?
Yeah.
Like, I'm lost.
I don't think. I think they both stream, just not that often. Flay sometimes goes by the name Agony. So Agony X. KZ Fox, I believe, was playing in the AWC Cups. I don't think Flay was playing in the AWC Cups. But both are typically considered really good ladder players. On the EU side of things, Brunity, ironically, is a Wrath Lich King private server player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting. And he's a rank 1 player. He's also played in the AWC as well on the EU side of things. So really accomplished player, but kind of most known for Wrath Lich King, ironically. Clyde has also played in the AWC, been around for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are just kind of, I mean, these aren't unknown players. They're just kind of more like laddery, based players, which I think with this particular format, I think I like solo shuffle. I think it's really good, but I think there's definitely some specs that just get absolutely wiped in the format. Like, people are talking about mages, for instance. Fire mages, really, really good in 3v3, or, pretty good in 3v3 at least, but kind of just suck in solo shuffle because you typically want to do, setups as a fire mage. Can't really do that, right? Like playing with certain classes. So I think, not to take anything away from the winners, I just think like one of the limitations of solo shuffle is I think it tends to amplify these sort of particular imbalances.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that normal 3v3 doesn't also do the same thing. It's just, a different format. So it's something to consider looking forward.
Yeah. I know there's a bunch of people talking about, the how Shadowlands is and class and spec balance and that. I will point out one other really neat thing. So I think one of the players on the NA side couldn't play, so they went to some alternates. And this one I found it is worth mentioning. So Bismex, who has been on the show talking about Hunter, quite well known player, came on and filled the NA spot as an EU player and made it to the finals or the semifinals, which I think is kind of funny, which is kind of awesome though. Like, I mean, it just goes to show how good of a player he is.
Just classic EU coming in to tear up the American bracket. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I think right now Jamie is the #1 rated player on NA, which is kind of funny. So a lot of crossover right now between the regions.
Yeah, I think that is also quite funny. Before we finish off, I think people are missed it in the chat. Nick's put it there. So, people, if you want the heroic bundle, type heroic B in chat, and your name will get put into the draw. If you don't type it in chat, you won't win. Do it now. All right, there we go. Into the next one, I want to talk Oasis. They had a Keystone tournament on the 25th. It was a big weekend for esports. Holy moly. It was wow. So they ran a Keystone tournament. It wasn't just the highest key. They went by Radar IO scores. And while they did it, it was just bragging rights for whoever won. But the real winner was the charity that they ran it for, which is Gamers Outreach, and they raised over $1,200 for that charity during the tournament, which I think is awesome. And quick congrats to the team, AM or PM, for winning the tournament and having the bragging rights. I think they have a little extra role or title on their heads over at the Oasis Discord now, which I think is pretty fun. Quickly, hot fixes. Hot fixes are still happening on Modern and on Classic. I didn't really notice anything worthwhile talking about, though. I think it's all still PvE related. I'm expecting we'll probably see some more stuff starting. Oh yeah, because next reset is when Season 5 starts in Wrath, right? So I think we'll start seeing maybe some hot fixes after that. But for sure, definitely, it's all just PvE stuff right now. One last quick one. I want to get your guys' take on this. The Gladiator's Distinction. That's the new Dragonflight trinket PvP trinket bonus that they're talking about over on the beta, which puts in an automatic 15% reduction to incoming crowd control effects. Doesn't stack, unlike Sefu's and the stuff that was stacking with Orc. What do you guys think about this? Good? Yeah, quick hot take. Big, you love giving hot takes. What's your quick hot take on this?
I think the target was to nerf Orc racial somehow, without affecting PvE, and I don't know if this is necessarily the best approach to it. I think definitely Orc racial is kind of oppressive in a few different ways. So yeah, I think it was a targeted nerf towards that, which unironically will just wind up buffing human, I believe, even more. So I don't know how I honestly feel about it. I think it's kind of a band-aid, like some changes are. It's to me, it's a band-aid solution onto a problem that is kind of complicated. Which is not to say that the band-aid won't help. It's just that the question is, will this create even more prevalent problems in other places? I don't know. So I mean I see the arguments on both sides. I'm particularly not too fond of it. I think just changing out Orc racial outright would have probably been a better solution. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't know how I honestly feel about it. I think it's just a band-aid. That's how I feel.
All right. Jake, what about you? What's your hot take?
My hot take is that the only way they'll ever fix this is by making racials kind of like how it is currently with Dungeons and Dragons with Tasha's Cauldron, but the ability to basically make it flexible. Like you can play any race, like whatever race you like, and you can choose whatever racial you want and keep it at that. And sort of you build your own sort of thing. Yeah, there'll be an optimum build, I'm sure, but then at least everyone's on the same playing field, and you're not forced to look a certain way. You can be whoever you want to be, which I think is quite poetically right for 2022. So I think that they should kind of do that in their class design, and I think that would solve all the issues.
Can I admit something?
Of course.
Don't tell anyone this. But
I try not to.
All listeners,
I've never unlocked the race, but man, I'd love to play Volpera. I love those little foxes, man. And I don't even know what the racial is. It's like a bag of tricks. I don't even know what it does, but I just know it's probably not good. So I wish I could play like a Volpera rogue, or like I know Mez plays Volpera assassination rogue, but it would be nice to play something like that while actually having like a more useful racial. So I definitely understand that perspective. I think a lot of people are on the side of disable racials entirely. I don't like that. Something in my gut just says that's wrong. And so yeah, I don't like that solution. So yeah, I like definitely on the side of Jake here. Keep racials in the game, but just kind of make them more accessible to make them part of your character's loadout in some capacity. So I can be playing Volpera.
Exactly.
That's what I want.
I actually have a video where I played Volpera Monk, and it was the best thing I ever did. Honestly, it was so good. And then like my ending was this little dance that they do, which is also incredibly cute. And I thought, this is the apex of my career. So
it's peak PvP.
Peak PvP.
That's awesome. So my hot take is, I think for the average player and the casual player, I think this trinket bonus is awesome. I get the point from some of the very high rateds and that, but I think on the average, I think this is awesome because it allows for somebody, yeah, regardless of the people don't pay attention to the min max, but it will help with some of the CC, especially if I understand there's going to be even more CC in Dragonflight. So this will just make it a little bit less painful for people. And so I think in that way, I think it's going to be really good. I do acknowledge the fact that in the min maxers, there, people are now looking at non-orc races, because this is going to help with other races to just shine that much better. Human. But I think for the average person, I think this is really good. And I think it also will help other races shine a little bit better. I don't disagree. I don't agree with shutting down all racials or making them, be able to swap them around. I think different racial abilities are part of identity setting with a race, as with your character. It gives you that little speciality for that one character that you made for you. Makes it unique. So I don't agree with that part, but I do recognize that there are other people that min max, that try to find that 0.01% difference that will give them that extra edge in 99% of the times, and then they make a guide and everybody else will cookie cutter that. But hopefully there's the people that will still just go, I want to play Vulpiran, or I want to play Gnome, and they'll do it. So be it. All right. I think that's that. So that's the end of the news. We're going to do our shout outs, and Nyx is going to end the draw. So yeah. And then we get to shout out whoever won. Big, do you have anybody to shout out?
Oh, jeez. Oh, I'm so bad at this. I don't know who. I know who to shout
prepared.
I'm going to shout out one of my fellow Twitter degenerates, Thoticus Finch.
Oh my gosh, I haven't heard of Thoticus for a long time.
Yeah, she recently came back to Twitter, which is really exciting. She's really, really funny. Geez, I don't know if I'm even allowed to say her Twitter handle. I guess I'll
just don't.
Okay. So if you just look up, well, I guess her name is even kind of suspicious too. Look up Thoticus on Twitter. Really funny. Post funny memes. She's a role player into PvP as well. So interesting character. So shout out to Thoticus.
All right. I love it. Jake.
I'm gonna shout out. I don't even think I can say my own guild name. I was gonna shout out the boys, from the guild, specifically my officers, the guys that are helping me run it. I am a busy person, as we all know, and it's very hard to fit in sort of this sort of thing. But I'm really glad I've got a bunch of friends. So I'm a big shout out to Orcs, Banana Raccoon, for kind of helping me. Sort of, Orcanax and Banana Raccoon for helping me out. They're easy to find. Banana Raccoon is a big content creator from Mop. Did a load of stuff sort of at Banana Raccoon TV. So yeah, those boys have been helping me out loads. So a big shout out to them. They've been amazing, and yeah,
nice. I want to give a big shout out to the community management team. They've been absolutely killing it with not only Wrath but also with Dragonflight. They I think it's amazing. They gave away a bunch of keys for us to give away. We're actually going to be getting some Dragonflight beta keys soon, TM. So we're going to be giving those away soonish. And yeah, so I think a huge shout out to them, and the effort is not simple. The whole thing isn't easy. I think it's worthy of a shout out of the amount that they are doing to help out not just us, but other streamers, other YouTubers, other content creators, big and small, which is absolutely amazing. And last but not least, a quick shout out to Mortai for winning the draw in chat. Congratulations, buddy. I'll DM you shortly with the code, and then you can use that to boost yourself a character and get right into Northrend and start just thrashing stuff. All right.
Well, not right into. I mean, you're gonna have to sit through a queue, but you'll be able to get into it eventually.
Too funny. I should make one quick note on benediction, because there were so many people. They were actually crashing the boats, so they did a server announcement, and they changed it where you just talk to the person at the end of the dock, the boatmaster, and he'd just teleport you to Northrend, because it was crashing the boats. Then but they typoed and they said effect instead of affect. So then their next server announcement was the server was learning was getting schooled on the difference between affecting and affecting, which I think is awesome.
That is awesome.
Big.
Your turn to shine, man. You list off where our listeners can reach us.
Absolutely, I can. So you can contact us directly with a tweet to at technically_PvP, or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Bonus Roll Productions Discord.
You can also visit the Bonus Roll website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at www.bonusroll.gg. This is a new directory and also has a review system, so head over there and tell everyone what you think about your favorite shows.
Indeed. And you can also oh wait, you already did that one. Nope. I was trying to do something else. Links for all these, like always, are going to be in the show notes. I want to thank everyone for listening, and we will chat with you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night.